lot of different reasons contribute to these changes, and they're not just religious. But I wanted to give you this list because it walks you through really some of the most essential differences that you see looking in general at music that was composed before the Council of Trent and music after the Council of Trent. Be careful because I don't want to essentialize this too much. If you see, for example, okay, I see equalized polyphony, but then I see clear cadences, so what do? Well, of course, it's not like 1560 happened and everybody was like, okay, we're done with column A and now we're going to do column B. Definitely that did not happen. But these are just basically a guide that will help you in, if somebody puts a score in front of you and says, okay, what, 16th century, when do you think it was composed? This gives you some ideas that you might fall on. So let me just go through these really quick. I'm guessing that you guys have talked about a lot of these already. The use of stacked thirds at cadences. This is something that you don't see, that if you see it in the pre-Council of Trent, it's a lot of times in the upper voice. It might be in a middle voice after the Council of Trent, so moving into the late 16th century. You see the kind of use of a third somewhere in the middle. Before the Council of Trent, the use of equalized polyphony. Think about Josquin, think about the Ave Maria, it's equalized polyphony. You start to see more polarized polyphony in the late 16th century. This means that the superius and the bassus parts are becoming increasingly important, and the middle voices aren't serving as important a role. Use of imitation is something that you probably have seen a lot in talking about early Renaissance music. You see more declaimed texts moving into the second half of the 16th century. These are texts that are delivered more like speech. Think back about the idea of the musician as an orator. This comes from the musica poetica concept, where the text has to be delivered like a speech in an interpretable way. I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to highlight some of the other really important ones. You get a lot of overlapped or evaded cadences. Did you guys talk about Willard at all? Or I'll show you a Willard example anyways, but you get really long phrases because the cadence points are very, very vague. It doesn't feel like you come to a clear ending in the music of the first half of the 16th century. In the second half, we start to move towards more sectional sounds. So very clear-cut cadences. Moving down to the use of the cantus firmus. You see a lot of instances where a cantus firmus is used in music of the Josquin and post-Josquin generation. Less and less of that is used afterwards. And similarly, that cantus firmus, while it may be secular in the first half of the 16th century, is probably going to be sacred if it's existing at all in the second half. And then just moving down to the very end again, you don't see as many tropes after the Council of Trent. You don't see as many sequences. So what I'd like to do,
one thing, for most of it, going from to the post-council, it seems like it's making, I guess, just music in general less complex.
Yes and no.
I was saying it added, instead of going from less than 5 voices, it goes to 4 or more voice parts, which wouldn't that make things more complicated.
Right, yeah. You do get, that's another really important one. I'm glad you highlighted that one. You get increasingly more performing forces in music of the second half of the 16th century. I'll show you, I wish I had brought this in, but I have a copy of Thomas Tallis' Spem and Allium. Has anybody heard that piece or anybody inquired? It's a motet for 40 voices. I have a copy of it just in the ground line. If anybody wants to see it after class, I have the score. I don't know why I didn't bring it in here, but it's crazy. All right, but what I'd like to do now is actually walk you through some examples. We're going to practice, just applying some of this knowledge to see if you can look at something and say, do you think it was composed before or after the Council of Trent general time period? And then if we've got time, maybe spend a little bit of time talking about Palestrina specifically in the way that he was perceived. All right. So let's just go through some of these. We'll see how many we can get through in just a couple minutes. All right, don't talk, don't say anything. Just look for the first couple seconds. Oh, one other thing, in addition to the voicing, one other thing I really, really want to stress. Going back to the idea of the music as oration, the music as interpretive. You get, in a lot of cases in the early 16th century, settings of texts that don't seem to care as much about where the emphasis, this syllabic emphasis falls. This is another thing that really changes with the late 16th century. There was a strong emphasis on placing longer notes or notes to which you're leaping or something like that on syllables that should be accented in speech. So it's a more speech-like sound in general. All right, here's the first one. Just take a look at it. at it for a moment. Why would you say that?
Because the third, and I'm assuming that's the bottom voice is a bass,
Yep.
but it's the third in the,
Oh, I'm sorry, there's no cups.
the third is in the top voice.
The third is in the top voice. That would suggest that it's earlier, right? Good. That's a good point. Anybody else have something that they observe?
Well, 3 voices.
Only 3 voices. Yeah, it's a smaller performing force. This one is actually later. And I put this, there's a couple of them, the point I wanted to make right off the bat here is that these are true most of the time, but not all of the time. This is actually a later 16th century work, but the observations you guys made would indicate something earlier, absolutely. How about this one? Yeah. Sorry, say again? Yeah, there's a huge number of voices. The text is moving in different voices, right? We actually see 2 different choirs performing here, huge number of voices. Anything else? Yeah.
I was gonna say it helps to give the composer.
Yeah,
Gabriele.
maybe it's too much of a clue.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the composer's name, right? Yeah, great. This is definitely a later one. How about this one? No. It's another tapered text, good. Is this polyphonic writing? No, you're shaking your head. It's really homophonic, isn't it? Yeah. What does that indicate already? Or you could hypothesize. Probably second half, yeah, absolutely. Another thing you could point out here is that we have 5 voices instead of 4. How about this one? Actually, I'll skip that because that's too late. Or what am I doing? My goodness, it's not too late. Polyphonic or homophonic writing? Very polyphonic. Does it look like all of the voice parts have equal value here, or are the outer 2 voices doing more interesting things than the inner 2 voices? Yeah. Somebody said something. They have equal value. This is equalized flipping, right? What do you guys think as a result of those 2 points?
Yeah, yeah. And it's also
Really?
pretty clear that there's really no cadence point in there or any indication of what would be a cadence
Well, we do
point.
get a cadence here, right?
That's,
You
yeah,
can
that's
see
the
2 moving
closest
to 1 and
thing,
7
yeah.
moving up to 1.
But yeah, the
but
lowest
yeah.
voice is completely empty in that section, and so it's
Uh-huh.
really strange that you leave out a full voice on the cadence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, how about this one? Is this basically polyphonic or homophonic writing? Mostly homophonic writing, right? What about the number of voices? What does that tell us? Probably later. And also you can see some evidence of, really, there's a lot of attention to what syllables should be stressed here. Domino, patria, Jesu. The emphasis is consistently on the syllables it should be on. All right, this is a really long one. Look at it. Don't say anything. See if you can see a cadence in here. Next page. Next page. Anything? You guys want me to go through it again? Here's the first one. Next one. Whoops. Cadences. It's a hugely long
Lots of
phrase, right?
imitation.
Say what, sorry?
Lots of imitation.
Lots of imitation, very long phrases, no clear-cut cadences. What does all that indicate to me? It suggests early. Now, this is a composer, maybe you guys talked about Morales already. This is a composer who is actually working so far afield from kind of the center place of Venice and Rome and Netherlands that he continued writing in a style that suggests something earlier, far into the 16th century. So it's another example that doesn't quite fit this categorization, but the style is earlier. Okay. Look here at the stress on the syllables. Vivat rex. How should that, where should the emphasis be on vivat? I guess I'm kind of giving it away already, just what I'm saying. On vivat, right? Vivat, race. I mean, this is just weird. Vivat. I mean, see how the stress is just not placed in the right location in some of these lines? What does that suggest? Earlier, right? All right, I'm going to move through these a little bit faster just to, well. How about this? This is not the cool one. This is not the 40-part one. But you can see from the extreme number of voices, we get more and more and more voices moving through the 16th century. Here's a text. This is a text extracted from an anonymous Kyrie. Take a look at this text and tell me what just looking at the text tells you about whether this was composed before or after the Council of Trent. Yeah. Sorry, did you?
I don't know.